Hello, good afternoon or good evening, depending of where you're watching. Thank you for joining us to the A4Q World Congress. Today and session is being with Fernando Valera. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you all for being here.
I'm just not going to take too much of Fernando's time because he has a great presentation ahead of us. I'm just going to do a very quick introduction of him. So for those that don't know him, Fernando Valera is part of the founding team of Visure Solutions and currently holds the position of CTO. He relocated to Silicon Valley in 2012, where he leads the development of innovative solutions for safety, critical, and regulated environments, primarily in the space of requirements, test, and risk management and product development. With over 18 years of experience in requirement management and a lot more, I'm not going to take too much of your time, and I'm going to pass it on to him now so he can get started with his presentation. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Well, thank you so much, Andrea, and as mentioned, thank you, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're connecting from. And today we will learn a little bit about the challenges in requirements management that we face nowadays, and also some tips on how to deal with them. Andrea did a fantastic introduction on who I am, or just a couple of highlights. The first one is that I'll have to recognize that even though I've spent the past almost decade in Silicon Valley, I confess that I moved out with the pandemic and following the tech exodus that you might have read about. Well, I moved a little bit south, looking for warmer weather, especially being originally from Spain. Now I'm based out of San Diego, and flying back and forth whenever is needed. But pandemic has changed a lot of ways. So I will be talking a little bit about requirements management challenges, hints, and a little bit about Visure. Visure is not only the company, but also is our requirements management ALM platform. It has been ranked as the #1 requirements management tool for 2 years in a row by Infotech and several other publications. And as you will have guessed, our headquarters are based out of San Francisco. That's where we conduct all the business, even though we have offices in Europe, Asia. And apart from the tool, we're also experts in requirements engineering. So we're training a lot of organizations on best practices, and we are also certifying requirement engineers on IREB. IREB stands for International Requirements Engineering Board, and it's a standardization of the best practices of the requirements engineering environment. So talking a little bit about the importance of requirements, I think we have all been in a project where we approach the delivery phase with a sense of relief, because after the 99% effect, where it seems that we're almost there, we never managed to get it, but finally we reached that delivery, and we're really proud of our system. In this case, we built this small, tiny house. We even included some delighters for the customer to be really happy, the red roof and so on. However, we actually missed a couple of requirements that actually resulted in a big mess. So the biggest challenges that we're facing nowadays, and I'll start with one that we have seen in the past months. Probably you've the majority of you have noticed that all of a sudden we're all extremely busy. We're all 150%, 120%, and we all think that it's part of our situation, part of our company. Well, this is a much broader scale. There are very few analyses indicating why this is happening, but the majority of the companies are just booming. And this might be related because B2C type of businesses during the pandemic have kind of slowed down or even closed. And all that revenue growth has automatically been diverted to B2B type of businesses. And depending on the B2B business, well, they've probably grown more or less. But among our customers in the tech environment, safety critical, like medical devices, aerospace, and so on and so on, many customers have actually seen a double-digit growth. It's been exponential. So all this post-its that you're having, and all this anxiety, all this work, all those nights with gin and tonic trying to finish everything, you're not on your own. That's at a global scale. We're also working 12 hours a day at home, no distractions, for those of you who don't have toddlers at home. Um, and actually that has presented a couple of challenges. And what do we do with so much business? So basically, companies are trying to catch up with all the work that was not done last year, and they're trying to catch up fast. Not only they're trying to catch up fast, but the increased revenue from last year allows companies to basically throw money into the development. Um, and from the requirements perspective, that is stressing the people and the processes. So from a requirements perspective, what we've seen in the past years, and now it's just accelerating, the number of requirements that we have per project are growing exponentially. And sorry to use the word growth and exponential, but that's basically what we're facing nowadays. And we see that software is taking over everywhere. We no longer go out to do things. Everything is remote. Everything is software based. So basically, this amount, this growing amount of requirements has impacted the way we work with projects. However, it's not just only a matter of the amount of requirements that we have, which have increased so much, but it's also the volatility of those requirements. What we see is that 3 to 5% of the requirements become obsolete per month. I mean, this is ridiculous if you think about it. So by the time that you finish the project, up to even 20%, 30% of a project, 40% of a project might not even look even close to what it did at the beginning of the project. So this takes us to the realization that no matter what we do now, we will have to change it. And that should drive some of the decisions that we make nowadays. So it's not just a matter of running like a headless chicken, but actually we will actually have to go back and redo some of the things that we did. And it's not that we can simply avoid change. Change per se is not bad. Too much change is definitely bad, but what we have to do is prepare for when those changes come. Another key aspect that we've seen, or a key challenge that we've seen in companies, is the requirements quality. So with this philosophy of running, what we've seen is that some companies have forgotten about the quality of the systems, or not so much of on the testing, because there's been a big emphasis and focus on testing. However, we've seen some organizations not putting the correct amount of focus on the requirements quality. And actually, numbers back this up. We can see that 60% of software defects are still 2020. We don't have figures from 2021, but 2020, we can still trace those issues to poor RDM practices. So poor RDM practices include not following a defined requirements process, defining the stakeholders of the requirements, defining the sources of the requirements, performing an appropriate elicitation, documentation, validation of the requirements, and management of the requirements. Also, not training users on how to write proper requirements. What are the rules for writing good requirements? What are the rules for writing good requirement documents? And basically, what we've seen is that what we have seen in the past decades, we get very close to the release of the project, and then all of a sudden, like major issues come up. So problems with assumptions that were not appropriate, problems with safety concerns, problems with the audit, problems with the documentation of the elements, and then we just have to go back and kind of redo our requirements in a sort of reverse engineering process. But reverse engineering is a humongous work. So we have to pay attention to that. And talking about the audit, I think that it's you might have already faced some of the challenges of the certifications. And from a Visure standpoint, we are sort of experts in medical devices, and particularly 62304, for instance. We work with automotive companies for the compliance of 26262. In general, 61508 in aerospace or aircraft, ARP 4754, DO2 178, DO2 54, CMI, SPICE, and whatnot. For instance, working with automotive companies, one of the biggest challenges for autonomous driving is not so much the technology, which obviously it is, but the certification of that technology. There is a new standard, SOTIF, for those of you in the environment, safety of the intended functions, and it's basically an attempt by the authorities to demonstrate that an autonomous car will behave with high quality standards, that it's not going to go berserk and run over the pedestrians, for instance, that will recognize traffic in the most appropriate way. So if you go back to the fundamentals of all these standards, they are essentially the same. And they are the same in not only in safety regulated industries, but also in non-related regulated industries. What we're trying to do is figure out the intended function, the behavior of the system, demonstrate that the system delivers no more and no less than what we intended it to deliver, and demonstrate that it's doing it appropriately, right? So if we're able to guarantee that, we will guarantee that the device is actually safe, right? This is obviously an oversimplification, but basically the standards impose a large amount of documentation, a large amount of demonstration, right? So that's definitely a challenge. So at this point, we might say, okay, well, requirements management looks like really important because the quality depends on it, the cost of the system depend on them. how much time should I spend on requirements management? Well, that's why I bring this slide, because I find it pretty fascinating in the sense that it relates overcost with time spent in the requirements. At the bottom, the x-axis represents the um, uh, the percentage um, of the cost of the project spent or allocated to requirements management in regards to the overcost. And each one of the dots is a different project. They're all coming from the same organization. And what we see is that around 14%, after spending 14% of the cost, the entire cost of a project dedicated to requirements management, we actually don't get any more like benefit. However, from there down, the cost just keeps increasing, and when we spend less than 2%, the cost just becomes exponential, right? And of course, you can see different exceptions. So, for instance, we can see this exception here at the bottom left corner, where the project was only 70% over cost, while spending only 1 or 2% in the requirements management. Well, I've seen those projects, and that's related to what we call the process heroes. So basically, you have people in the organization that have been there for decades. They know the project, they know the system. They can just code blindfold, and the estimations are going to be extremely accurate. Well, we can do that, but then we cannot allow them to take vacations or even retire, because the day they retire, then we've got a massive issue in the organization, right? That's why what we want to do is put the stress on the process, and that's with no surprise the first tip that I would like to present today to overcome the challenges that I mentioned. And it's consolidating and automating the development process. Well, basically, what we have been doing, or what we have been trying to do for the past years, right? However, what we're going to see now is that the larger organizations that do not have well-defined processes will struggle, or will have been struggling for the past months. And the pandemic has a lot to do with this. We no longer have um, the capability of sharing the outputs with the teams while having a coffee, or having on-site meetings where we fully explain what we try to do to other members of the team. So all that has to be replaced by an actual process. Even, sometimes you text members of the team, and they you don't even know whether they're actually working on one thing or the other. You cannot just walk through to somebody to say, "Hey, did you read this email?" And so priorities shift. The same thing happens with smaller organizations that will not be able to grow without a process-centric development. So our recommendation is to basically move forward with that automation. That's number one need in terms of requirements management in the current situation. And moving forward means figuring out that sweet spot in between a full agile and a waterfall type of process. And I think everybody nowadays is trying to figure out whether agile works for them. So agile is the tool. We cannot forget that agile is a tool, and it will work for certain type of projects. Just imagine agile as a hammer. Well, not everything in this world is a nail, right? So a full agile, brings its values. It's generally it takes longer than a well-defined waterfall process. So, for instance, that's one of the cons of Agile. So, you will reach acceptance iteratively, so that's another advantage. But well, you just have to figure that out. The second, and as well, this does not come as a surprise. The second tip is enable remote work philosophy. And we're not talking about just having Outlook or installing Teams. So what we're talking about is the fact that we cannot instill a the DNA of the company in new employees or employees that haven't spent a lot of time in the company just by going out lunch with us. And that's the way it used to be. Uh, just by networking with the rest of the employees, people would actually understand the philosophy and understand uh, the what I call the DNA, right? So all that has to be made explicit. You might actually need to tell employees what the expectations and the philosophy is. So, of course, we need to set up the tools in place, but we have to use those tools in the proper way. We recommend defining networking events within the organization. I think by now we're all completely crazy. We want to go out. We're like house cats. We don't even know whether the first time we go outside we're going to be anxious, whether everything is going to work or not. So just make sure that you're not losing the connectivity between the employees and between the management as well. So just engage them in networking events after work, one way or the other. Um, you know, uh, of course, use Teams, but that philosophy is fundamental, right? Um, and then, of course, keep an eye on requirements quality. What am I gonna say, right? But when I talk about requirements quality, so I know we all need to run and deliver as fast as possible, but just a couple of highlights. Research indicates that 80% of the cost of the system is defined at the requirements level. So whether you write requirements in one way or the other, that will absolutely determine the outcome. And I know this is obvious, but still, I see far too many companies not fully grasping the impact of this. So, for instance, if you make too many assumptions, then it's just literally or if you don't have all requirements written down, it's impossible to determine the cost or an estimation of the cost. The um, the cost of a project increases exponentially with errors introduced in the requirements phase. We all know that. But basically, what we're talking about is make sure that you have not only a defined process, but also make sure that you establish review processes where you make sure that all the rules to writing requirements are observed. Make sure that the rules for writing requirement documents are observed. And make sure that the requirements management process is followed. And that you establish traceability. Um, Probably there might be a combination of uh, of different industries today. We might have attendees from safety critical environments, and all this comes as a given. For those of you who are not in regulated environments, traceability is absolutely key to answer some questions. Like, for instance, if we change a requirement, um, and say in a V life cycle, but this would apply to agile environments as well. If we change the user story, are we still meeting the customer requirements? That's the first question I would ask myself if I change a requirement. Will I be able to use the same tests to verify the changes, or do I have to adapt them to these changes? Am I testing everything? I might make some modifications and then I'm not verifying 100% of my system. But also, am I implementing everything? And is all the source code being tested? Not only from a functionality perspective, but also from a source code coverage perspective, right? Those are fundamental questions. And I will bring up another number from the FDA that said that 80% of the software changes are related to modifications in the requirements. So that means that we are able to create fantastic products or projects. However, when we have to change something, that's when everything falls apart, right? Good. And the final tip, and again, this comes as no surprise here. We should be adopting productivity tools, and I think the market has realized, understood this pretty clearly. So in our case, my recommendation, of course, is to adopt tools, requirements engineering tools in particular, like Visure Requirements ALM, because they will help you with a collaboration between the teams, establishing a conversation, an approval, a review process. It will help you automate the requirements management process. It will help you automate, to a certain extent, the test management process, risk management if you're following FMEA, variations of FMEA, ASIL, that can be automated as well to a certain extent, but also things like the requirements quality. Tools like Visure, or Visure in particular, have modules that can tell you if a requirement has not been properly written, or if there are some aspects that are that need to be improved in that requirement. And just as a couple of highlights here, the first of all, and this is a screenshot of Visure as an example. The first thing that a requirements management tool should do is display or help you access all the documentation, right? That's kind of like the bare minimum. But if we're using Word and Excel, the first thing that we realize is that there is no single source of truth. So we're just sending out documents here and there. Some users might actually get hold of an older version of the document, then we've got a big mess. So being able to present the latest version or the appropriate version to the appropriate users is a must. And requirements management tools help. But the same thing applies to the actual requirements within the document. So whenever we open the product requirements document or the user story, so whatever, we should be able to read the entire document, all the requirements, and we should be able to keep track of what's going on, who changed what, when was this requirement changed. Only specific users should be able to modify that particular requirement. For instance, you can see at the right-hand side of the screen that there might be a conversation going on over this requirement in a WhatsApp type of thread. People can reply to the thread. The thread or the concern can be resolved, or new concerns can be brought into the light. All this is also a must for requirements engineering tools. But also, and this is where the real advantages of the tools come into place. Visure provides a pretty unique capability, which is that once we have all these documents, right, and we have a requirements document, we have a test document and a risk and so on and so on, how do we put all these documents into context? Meaning that which elements do I need to trace to which document? So the Visure requirements allow us to represent a graphical representation of the traceability and the actual process. So for instance, what we're seeing in here is a representation of a V life cycle where we have product requirements flowing down into system requirements, flowing down into component requirements, and the different parts of the component requirements, like mechanical, electrical, software, provided that you have those, or whatever other types, if you have labeling requirements, environmental, whatnot. And on the right-hand side, we might have the corresponding part of the life cycle, all the test cases. But basically what we're saying is, well, here we have this document is called like this, and if you double click on it, then it'll open. So users will not be able to do anything else than what is defined in these diagrams. And that way we are keeping consistent the traceability according to what we are meant to be doing. But as what we mentioned earlier, each organization should decide the sweet spot between agile and the V life cycle. This is a V life cycle, and you should not um, um, do what the tool tells you to do. You should be able to customize the tool to make it particular to your organization. So for instance, here we have another example of the same diagram based on an agile approach. So for instance, we can have the software requirements. Actually, the end of the V life cycle could be the beginning of this agile process, indicating that we actually have both in the same organization, or for instance, the software team might be following agile and the mechanical electrical team or somebody else is following a completely different approach. So the software requirements just flow down into the product backlog. And the product backlog is just basically a composite of all the different user stories or epics. Depends in this case. This is what we are defining as an example, but this can be fine-tuned to represent your flavor of agile. And then user stories decomposed into different tasks that can then be assigned to different members of the team into different sprints. And then how do test cases relate to all this process as well? Sorry, to all these element types, then we can just relate them in here. And just basically with the just to finish with the presentation, once we have defined those diagrams indicating what can be traced to what and how exactly, then the tools will facilitate establishing traceability in a way that is manageable, right? So in this case, Visure will propose the two documents that you want to trace side by side, and you can just establish drag and drop, establish traceability through drag and drop. And then if something changes, then we can keep track through an impact analysis view of which elements are affected by that change, and so on. Very good. So we basically reached the end of the presentation. I would just like to mention that change is optional. We are facing very peculiar challenges. I proposed some sort of obvious, but sometimes hard to understand and actually complete hints on how to overcome those challenges. And well, change is optional because survival is not mandatory, right? However, we're all fighting to grow right now, and pretty fast. So Oh, I would like to thank you all for attending today's presentation. I hope you can take some things back. You can contact us at info@visuresolutions.com if you would like more information on, requirement courses, on visual requirements, the tool itself. You would like to check it out, evaluate it, or you have whatever questions on the presentation or specific questions on your particular situation for me. At the same time, here you have, we have a couple of minutes for Q&A, so please go for it. You can probably post it in the panel on the right-hand side or somewhere.
Hi, Fernando. Thank you so much for that presentation. Very interesting. If anyone have any questions, more than welcome to put them in the comment section now, so we can have a very quick look at them. We have a couple of minutes still available. And I also wanted to say we have over here someone that was asking, one second, let me just look at the group. Oh, they were actually asking for the email address, the one here on screen. I'm gonna put it again here for a couple of seconds. So in that way as well, I'm gonna probably type it as well. So that was easier for everyone to also copy.
Mhm. And what I'm going to do is that I'll post in the chat my email address. It's fvalera@visuresolutions.com. So F Fernando and Valera, Valera.
Great. I just put it in the comment section as well. So if anyone have any questions for Fernando or his presentation, more than welcome to also get in contact with him via there. We also have the Congress Hall area. I don't know, Fernando, if you're going to be joining for a couple of minutes after your presentation there, in
Yeah,
case.
I will.
Okay, lovely. So, for those that I also believe that I've shared over here the Congress Hall link, I'm gonna just put it in the comment section as well in case anyone has any questions or you would like to discuss with Fernando a little bit more in depth. I'm gonna put it just over here. There you go. So I've just shared the link there for those that would like to also talk with Fernando after his presentation. Thank you so much. So I can see so far just a couple of people that are saying thank you so much. Very interesting presentation. And one second over here. Yes, so they were saying thank you and they were saying hello from Spain actually.
Hey.
But I cannot see any questions so far in the comment sections. So thank you so much, Fernando, for joining us today. And if anyone is interested to talk to him a little bit more after his conference, more than welcome to go to the link I shared as well in the comment section. And take care, everyone, and have a very good evening. And we have actually one more presentation for today, the first day, is starting in about a bit less than 10-15 minutes now. So if you're interested in that as well, more than welcome to keep on watching as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Take care.